10 interceptors. 10 of the most advanced, sophisticated, and expensive pieces of defensive technology ever created by human engineering were fired into the sky. Their mission was singular: stop an incoming threat that had been detected moments earlier. Radar systems worth billions of dollars tracked the target. Computers capable of trillions of calculations per second plotted the intercept course. The systems worked exactly as designed. The interceptors launched. They streaked upward, hunting for the kill, and one by one, all 10 of them failed. They didn't malfunction. They didn't lose power. They were simply outmatched by a weapon that moved in ways they were never programmed to understand. When the smoke cleared, 7 of Israel's most senior military commanders were dead inside a bunker that was specifically designed, built, and fortified to keep them alive through Armageddon. I want you to sit with that reality for a second. This wasn't a lucky shot by a rogue militia using a homemade rocket. This wasn't a saturation attack where thousands of cheap drones overwhelmed the defenses through sheer volume. This was a precision strike by a single missile that penetrated the most dense, layered, and alert air defense network on the planet. 7 generals, the brains of the military operation, gone in an instant. This is not a story the mainstream media is giving the attention it deserves. You might see a 5-second clip on the nightly news, sandwiched between a celebrity scandal and the weather forecast. But what actually happened in that bunker? What that strike means for every military on Earth, and what it tells us about the fragile state of global security, is a conversation that goes far deeper than any soundbite. That is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to the Global Brief. In this report, we are going to dissect an event that military historians will likely look back on as a turning point in the history of warfare. We are going to talk about the Fattah-2, the hypersonic weapon that just rendered traditional missile defense obsolete. We are going to explore why a vice president at one of the world's leading defense contractors is publicly admitting that we have entered a new era where the old rules no longer apply. And by the time we are done, you will understand why the safety of every forward-deployed base, carrier strike group, and command center is now an open question. This is not hype. This is not exaggeration. This is the new physics of war. To understand the magnitude of this moment, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the broader context that made this strike possible, because nothing in war happens in a vacuum. For months, tensions in the Middle East had been building to a breaking point. Intelligence analysts in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv were warning of a dangerous escalation, a diplomatic phrase that really means we are losing control of the situation. Proxy forces were trading blows with conventional militaries. Covert operations were striking deep inside sovereign territory. The United States had moved massive naval assets into the region as a show of force. Israel was on high alert. But beneath the surface of these visible moves, a different kind of preparation was underway. Both sides knew that the skirmishes were just a prelude. They were preparing for the main event. And then it happened. A coordinated large-scale military assault was launched against Iran. The details of who fired first and what triggered the specific timing remain a matter of fierce debate, shrouded in the fog of war and competing propaganda narratives. But what is not debated, what was captured on radar and confirmed by defense officials, is Iran's response. They didn't scramble their aging fleet of fighter jets, which would have been shot down in minutes. They didn't launch a swarm of slow-moving drones that could be picked off by anti-aircraft guns. Instead, they reached into a deep, dark drawer of their arsenal, a drawer that Western intelligence knew existed but hoped would remain closed. They pulled out a weapon that the world had heard rumors about, seen in parades, and analyzed in grainy spy satellite photos, but had never actually seen used in anger. They fired the Fattah-2, and they didn't fire it at a runway or a fuel depot. They fired it at the head of the snake, the fortified command center directing the war against them. Let's talk about the weapon itself, because understanding the Fattah-2 is the key to understanding why 10 interceptors failed. Most people have a mental image of a missile that is based on technology from the Cold War. A ballistic missile launches like a rocket, goes up into space, and then falls back down. It follows a ballistic trajectory, a parabolic arch that is governed by the laws of gravity. As soon as the rocket motor burns out, The missile is essentially a rock thrown very hard. Because gravity is constant, you can calculate exactly where that rock will be in 5 minutes. This predictability is the foundation of every modern missile defense system. Systems like the Patriot, THAAD, or Arrow work by solving a math problem. Their radar sees the launch, tracks the missile for a few seconds, calculates the parabola, and then launches an interceptor to meet the missile at a specific point in the sky. It is like a bullet hitting a bullet. It is incredibly difficult engineering, but it is solvable math. If the target behaves like a rock, the interceptor can hit it. The Fattah-2 breaks this entire logic. It is not a standard ballistic missile. It is what military experts call a hypersonic glide vehicle, HGV. It launches on a massive rocket booster, just like a normal missile, to get up to speed and altitude. It punches through the atmosphere, reaching the edge of space. But then, instead of just falling back to Earth in a predictable arch, the warhead separates from the booster. It becomes a glider, but not a slow, drifting glider. We are talking about a vehicle moving at speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15. That is roughly 10,000 to 11,000 miles per hour. At that speed, the air in front of the vehicle is compressed so violently that it turns into plasma, a superheated ionized gas that can actually block radar signals. But speed alone isn't the problem. The problem is maneuverability. The Fattah-2 can change course. It can dip, dive, bank, and turn while traveling at hypersonic velocities. Imagine a pitcher throwing a baseball at 100 miles per hour, but halfway to the plate, the ball decides to turn left, then drop 2 feet, then curve back right. How does the batter hit that? They don't. That is exactly what happened to the 10 interceptors. The radar systems detected the launch. The computers calculated an intercept point based on the initial trajectory. The interceptors were launched toward that point. But while the interceptors were in flight, the Fattah-2 maneuvered. It changed its path. The radar saw the change and tried to update the interceptors, but at Mach 15, the geometry of the engagement changes in milliseconds. The interceptors couldn't turn fast enough. They couldn't bleed off energy fast enough to match the turn. They ended up chasing a ghost, flying to where the target was, not where it is. This capability creates a nightmare scenario for defenders. Every time the hypersonic glider maneuvers, the defense system has to restart its calculation. It creates a loop of observe, orient, decide, act that is simply too slow. The missile gets inside the decision cycle of the defense, and because it is unpowered during the glide phase, it doesn't have a heat plume from a rocket engine that infrared sensors can track easily. It is a cold, dark, incredibly fast needle in a very large haystack. Now let's talk about the target. The choice of target was deliberate and strategic. It wasn't random. The missile struck a specific fortified IDF command center. This wasn't a tent in the desert. This was a hardened facility built with reinforced concrete, buried underground, and designed to withstand near misses from heavy bombs. It was the nerve center for the regional defense. The 7 senior officers inside were not low-level functionaries. They were commanders. They were the people making the decisions about troop movements, airstrikes, and defensive deployments. By killing them, Iran achieved what is known as decapitation. They removed the leadership layer in a single strike. This has a paralyzing effect on the military organization. Orders stop flowing. Confusion sets in. Subordinate units don't know whether to advance or retreat. It disrupts the entire OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, of the opposing force. But the strike also revealed something terrifying about the destructive power of hypersonic weapons, kinetic energy. A conventional missile relies on an explosive warhead to do damage. It hits the target and goes boom. But a hypersonic vehicle moving at Mach 15 possesses an insane amount of kinetic energy just from its motion. Remember your high school physics. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 the mass times the velocity squared. Because the velocity is so high, Mach 15, the energy is exponential. When the Fattah-2 hit that bunker, it didn't just explode on the roof. The sheer force of the impact, the kinetic energy, drove the warhead through the concrete and steel like a hot knife through butter. It acted like a massive bunker-buster bomb, but without needing a massive explosive payload. The impact alone creates a shockwave that can collapse tunnels and shatter foundations. It turns the bunker's own structure against the people inside. The fortification becomes a tomb. This means that hardening a target, burying it deeper, adding more concrete, is no longer a guarantee of survival against this class of weapon. This reality forces a complete rethink of military doctrine. For 50 years, the strategy has been survivability through fortification. You build strong bunkers to protect your leaders and your nukes. The Fattah-2 renders that strategy obsolete. If you cannot protect a fixed location, you have to move. You have to disperse. You have to rely on mobile command posts, which are harder to secure and have less communications capability. This degrades your ability to fight a coordinated war. And here's the part that honestly stopped me cold when I first researched this. The person who confirmed the severity of this threat wasn't an Iranian propagandist. It was a vice president at Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. Rafael is the Israeli defense giant that builds the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Spider system. These are the people whose job it is to stop missiles. Their own executive went on record publicly and said that hypersonic missiles like the Fattah-2 have opened a new era in air defense. He used an analogy that is chilling in its clarity. He compared defending against a hypersonic missile to trying to guard LeBron James with a single player. You can run as hard as you want. You can be in the right position. But the physical dominance of the opponent means they are going to score. You cannot stop LeBron one-on-one. You need a team. You need a system. And right now, against the Fattah-2, the system doesn't exist. We have interceptors designed to stop rocks, ballistic missiles, and planes, aerodynamic targets. We do not have interceptors designed to stop maneuvering rocks that fly like planes at Mach 15. The reports from the region indicate that the IDF command center was not the only target. Sources suggest that Fattah-2 missiles were also directed at U.S. military facilities in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. These are major American bases. They house thousands of troops, billions of dollars in aircraft, and critical logistics hubs. They are protected by Patriot batteries and THAAD systems, the absolute best air defense money can buy. And the reports suggest the outcome was the same. The missiles penetrated the shield. This is a strategic earthquake for the United States. American power projection in the Middle East, and globally, relies on the assumption of sanctuary. We assume our forward bases are safe because we own the air. We assume we can park our aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf because we can shoot down anything that comes at them. That assumption is now a liability. If Iran can reach out and touch a base in Qatar or a carrier in the Gulf with a weapon we cannot reliably intercept, then those bases are no longer assets. They are targets. They are hostages. Consider the logistics of the defense. An interceptor missile for the Patriot system costs roughly $4 million. A THAAD interceptor costs significantly more. If the enemy fires a salvo of hypersonic missiles and you have to fire 2, 3, or 4 interceptors at each one just to have a prayer of hitting it, you are burning through tens of millions of dollars in seconds. And here is the kicker. We don't have enough of them. The U.S. Defense Industrial Base produces these interceptors at a trickle. We are sending them to Ukraine. We are stockpiling them for a potential conflict in the Pacific, and we are deploying them to the Middle East. The inventory is thin. If Iran can produce Fattah-2 missiles at a fraction of the cost of our interceptors, and they can, then we are on the wrong side of the cost curve. They can afford to fire more missiles than we can afford to shoot down. This is called magazine depth. In a sustained conflict, the side that runs out of ammo first loses. And right now, the math suggests the defense runs dry long before the offense does. This brings us to the broader geopolitical picture. How did Iran get this technology? Developing a hypersonic glide vehicle is incredibly difficult engineering. It requires advanced materials to survive the heat of re-entry, temperatures that can melt steel. It requires sophisticated guidance computers to handle the aerodynamic instability. It requires wind tunnels and testing infrastructure. For a nation under crippling sanctions to achieve this is, frankly, astounding. But they didn't do it alone. We have to look at the partnerships. Russia has the Kinzhal and the Zircon hypersonic missiles. China has the DF-17 glide vehicle. North Korea has been testing the Hwasong-8. There is a clear axis of technology transfer happening here. Knowledge, blueprints, testing data, and perhaps even components are flowing between these nations, bypassing Western sanctions. The Fattah-2 is likely the child of this collaboration. It represents the collective knowledge of the anti-Western bloc, refined and deployed by Iranian engineers. This means that the threat isn't just Iranian, it is global. If Iran has this capability, then we have to assume that any adversary aligned with this bloc can access it. It lowers the barrier to entry. Suddenly, a regional power like Iran can threaten a superpower like the United States in a way that was impossible 5 years ago. It creates a leveler. It erodes the technological overmatch that the U.S. military has relied on since Desert Storm. So, what is the response? How do you defend against the undefendable? There are two schools of thought emerging in the Pentagon. The first is left of launch. If you can't shoot the arrow down, you have to shoot the archer. This doctrine argues that the only way to stop a hypersonic attack is to destroy the launchers on the ground before they fire. This requires incredible intelligence. You need to know where the mobile launchers are hiding in the vast deserts and mountains of Iran. You need persistent surveillance from drones and satellites. And you need the political will to strike preemptively inside sovereign territory. This is a recipe for rapid escalation. It pushes commanders to have a hair-trigger mentality. If they see a launcher moving, they have to hit it now, because once the missile is in the air, it is too late. The second school of thought is directed energy, lasers and high-powered microwaves. A laser moves at the speed of light. It doesn't care if the target is maneuvering. It doesn't care if it is hypersonic. If you can keep the beam on the target for a few seconds, you can burn through the sensor dome or destabilize the airframe, causing it to break apart in the high-speed airflow. The U.S. military has been pouring money into this technology, but field-ready, high-power lasers are still years away from being a widespread defensive shield. We are in a dangerous gap period, a window of vulnerability where the offensive technology, hypersonics, has matured, but the defensive technology, lasers, has not yet caught up. This gap is where the danger lies. History is full of wars that started because one side thought they had a temporary advantage they had to use, or the other side thought they were vulnerable and had to strike first. The debut of the Fattah-2 has opened such a window. It has emboldened Iran and its proxies. It has shaken the confidence of Israel and the Gulf states. It has forced the U.S. to reconsider its force posture. Let's go back to that command bunker. Imagine the final moments. The radar operators seeing the track, the interceptors launching, the realization that the geometry of the engagement was wrong, the frantic calls on the radio, and then silence. That silence is the sound of a paradigm shifting. It is the sound of the old world dying. The media might move on. The ticker at the bottom of the screen will change to the next political scandal or celebrity gossip, but in the halls of power, the echo of that strike is still ringing. Military budgets will be rewritten, alliances will be strained, strategies will be torn up and redrafted. Because the fundamental question remains unanswered. If they fire again, can we stop it? Right now, the honest answer is no. And that no is the most dangerous word in international relations. It invites aggression. It undermines deterrence. It changes the calculation of risk. If a rogue state knows it can punch through the shield, it is much more likely to throw a punch. We are watching a real-time evolution of warfare. The tank changed war. The airplane changed war. The nuclear bomb changed war. The hypersonic missile is the next chapter. It collapses time and distance. It shrinks the world. A decision made in Tehran can result in an impact in Tel Aviv or Riyadh in under 10 minutes. There is no time for diplomacy hotline calls. There is no time for evacuation. There is only launch and impact. This speed of war compresses the decision-making cycle for leaders. It forces them to rely on automated systems and AI to respond because human reflexes are too slow. We are moving toward a future where machines fight machines at speeds we can barely comprehend, and the humans are just spectators hoping the algorithms work. The 7 generals who died were not victims of bad luck. They were victims of a technological leap. They were protected by the best shield the 20th century could provide, but they were killed by a 21st century sword. This disconnect between the legacy systems we have and the future threats we face is the defining challenge of our time. As we move forward, watch the defense budgets, watch the deployments. You will see a rush to develop counter-hypersonic sensors, space-based tracking layers that can see these gliders from orbit, and new interceptors designed to maneuver in the upper atmosphere. You will see a push for distributed command structures, moving away from big, juicy targets like centralized bunkers. You will see a renewed focus on electronic warfare, trying to jam the guidance systems of these missiles. But all of that is reaction. The initiative currently belongs to the side with the hypersonic weapon. They dictate the tempo, they choose the time and place. And until the defense catches up, we are living in a period of heightened instability. This is not fear-mongering. This is a sober assessment of the military reality. The Fattah-2 exists. It works. It kills. And it has broken the shield. Ignoring this reality won't make it go away. Understanding it is the first step in navigating the dangerous world we now inhabit. We are going to keep tracking this development closely. We will be watching for the inevitable countermoves, the technological responses, and the shifting political alliances that stem from this event. Because this isn't just a story about a missile. It is a story about the balance of power in the most volatile region on Earth. And that balance has just tipped. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to understand the deeper currents shaping our world. This is the Global Brief. We don't just read the news, we analyze the reality behind it. Stay vigilant, stay informed. And remember, in the era of hypersonic warfare, the only warning you might get is the one you give yourself by understanding the threat before it arrives.